Welcome back to our new series called Coloring Outside the Lines, where we're looking at the book The Divine Commodity by Skye Jethani. And it's really about how consumerism has maybe infiltrated the church or influenced the church in certain ways, and how sometimes we just take a step back, look at how that has happened and what we might do to correct that, or maybe what we're calling color outside the lines of what we've always done. So today we're talking about brands. And I love in the book where he starts off with the idea that children can recognize brands before they can even read.
Well, I can relate to that. Thinking of my kids, like it would have been Sleep Country, like just to see the store. They would see that and they could, recite the jingle. They would recite the advertisement. 1 in 3 people suffer from whatever. They go through the whole thing. So the fact that they can recognize brands before they can read. Yep.
Yeah, makes sense. That's
tell you all about the brand too.
And I like the idea, or I like the explanation. Skye's research in there, and according to Colin Bates, who's a marketing expert, he says that a brand is a collection of perceptions in the mind of a consumer. As such, the goal of branding is to manipulate people's minds so they involuntarily associate a logo with a predetermined feeling.
Sure.
So it's not necessarily even based on reality. This is a great watch. It's by wearing this watch, it makes me feel a certain way.
Yeah.
That's the point of.
Well, there's lots of things they say when it comes to, like, especially things catching on.
Yeah.
Obviously, if it can elicit an emotion, you tend to share it. If it gives you some sort of social credibility, you tend to talk about it. And I think that's all that it's, he's eliciting that, like, oh, I have this thing. Like, how does this make me look in front of people?
Okay, well, I've got some brand logos we're going to look at here, and let's obviously we know what they are, but if you should be able to recognize them when we put them up on the screen, and let's just talk about what kind of feelings they invoke. So let's put the first one up here. This is obviously the Nike logo. What sort of feeling does the Nike logo mean for you?
I can run fast.
Yeah.
But nobody asked me when I got my new shoes.
Yeah. Well, I just think of Air Jordans kind of thing. They were a big thing when my kids were in school, and
the movie just came out.
I actually want to watch that.
It was really good.
And the whole idea is that they really cater to athletes, and if you are not necessarily a great athlete, you still think the shoes might give you a bit of an advantage.
Yeah, that and you feel connected. Like this is, one of the best athletes. Yeah, especially in basketball, and it's sort of like, oh, we wear the same shoes.
Exactly.
We're connected somehow.
And then next one up is the McDonald's logo, the golden arches, and I think they were one of the very first ones that promoted the idea that fast food could taste good. Mm-hmm. There was a study done in 2007, this is interesting, by Stanford University, and they found that carrots, milk, and apple juice tasted better to children when they were packaged in McDonald's wrappers or containers.
Again, I can go back to my kids, whatever reason, McDonald's is like, that's like high quality eating for them. And
I remember when I was a kid, McDonald's was fairly new at the time. To how old I am.
And there's a movie about that too.
And I thought it tasted good, and I mean, I obviously ate it during teenage years and growing up, and when my kids were young, lots of time. But I've been away from it for quite a while, and now that I've tasted it recently, and it's pretty bland, if I'm honest. And yet, I've seen people in their 30s and 40s swear, or they still go to McDonald's, and they have this idea that that's what taste they prefer.
Sure,
because that's what they're used to, and the marketing has been extremely effective. Okay, next up, one that one of my personal preferences is the Apple logo. I own an iPhone, and I use a Mac computer, and I think the Apple brand has sort of a high quality kind of standard about it, and
so, yeah.
It's a little more expensive, but some would claim it's worth it because it has more features, and they certainly market it to the average user and creatives as opposed to geeks kind of thing. You don't have to be an engineer to use a Mac computer when,
right.
I mean, if I'm totally honest, it's a tool and we all prefer certain tools, but essentially they all perform the same function. And I'm probably letting down my tribe there, but
yes. And if you're an Android user, feel free to comment and tell Ron how he's wrong.
You use an iPhone.
I know. I just thought it'd be really fun in the comments.
Yeah, sure. There we go. Next one up we have here is a very familiar one there, Mercedes-Benz logo. And I know that is certainly become a symbol of status. Yep. Yeah. And then next up we have the very family fun Walt Disney logo.
Yep.
They definitely, that logo brings a certain, I know I've been to Disney World and at Disneyland, and they're very, that sort of evokes a good feeling anytime we think about it.
You could probably put expensive on that one too.
Yeah. Yeah, you've been recently with
yeah, it's expensive.
It is expensive, yeah. And and we've dropped lots of money buying their merchandise for kids. Yeah,
that's true.
And then there's this next one here. We all know it's on every corner in North America. The Starbucks logo, and they're really promoting. I mean, it's a coffee shop, but their coffees are expensive.
Mm-hmm. So expensive again. Starting to see a trend.
Starting to see a trend that we pay more for those good feelings.
Yeah.
And there again, it's not just coffee or a coffee shop. They're promoting warmth and community.
Yeah. Lots
of people go there just to work. So, I mean, obviously these are all emotional connections we have with a brand logo. And as we've said, emotional connections can actually alter our perception of reality and our behavior. And it's interesting to note that companies now spend more creating a powerful brand than a quality product that meets a need.
Mm. Yeah, and it is that. Like, I mean, it's if you can get just people, truthfully, if we can get people just so connected to it somehow, you don't necessarily want your product to absolutely be terrible.
No.
But if you can create that connected, it doesn't need to be as good as you could make it necessarily.
Yeah.
Because people have brand loyalty. There's a lot of people, going back to Starbucks. I mean, sometimes there is that fight between Starbucks and say a different kind of coffee shop. Yeah. And there's that sometimes I'm not even convinced. Now, I'm not a huge coffee person, so I don't know. But like sometimes it's like there's that fight of what's the better coffee, and it's this way you make it or this way, all that sort of. And sometimes it sounds exactly the same to me. It's like, okay, so you guys are both writing the same thing, and it's like, no, you have a brand for every reason. You prefer them.
Yep.
There's some connection there. Now, feel free to comment if you disagree.
For the first time ever, we're going to get tons of comments. Yeah.
Yep.
That's interesting. And I think we buy into the brand as much as we buy into the quality of any product. And I know in the book, Skye talks about Richard Branson and the Virgin brand. And he started off with a record label and was very popular. And now there's Virgin everything, Virgin Mobile, Virgin Airlines. And he can pretty much put that a logo on anything, and we'll give it a try because if we're happy with one, we might be happy with the next one.
Absolutely.
Now, again, the danger with this type of marketing and branding is that it has come to ascribe meaning to a person's life, which is our identity. So being a consumer is actually a system of meaning. So philosopher Jean Baudrillard says, we define our identity and contract meaning for our lives through the brands we consume. So brands shape and sometimes even become or substitute for our identity. So in order to figure out who we are then, we have to decide where we're going to shop and what we're going to shop for. It's a little scary to me.
Yeah, it makes sense though.
Yep, shopping has become one of the leading pastimes in North America. Like, let's go to the mall.
You don't even have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
We'll put that logo right here.
Amazon is not a sponsor. Yes. There's another philosopher, Marty Neumeier, suggests that brands have a spiritual ability to construct a self-identity. And this was, as he notes, was previously accomplished primarily by the religion you ascribe to. So if brands are the new religion, then has religion been reduced to brands?
Well, that's an interesting question.
Yeah, and research has shown that there's little or no discernible difference in behavior or values of self-identified Christians from non-Christians, with one major exception.
What they buy?
What they buy. Christians consume more than $7 billion of religious products annually in North America. When I read that, I was shocked.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't have. I mean, I would have not surprised by it being a lot, but I don't think I would have ever thought $7 billion annually.
Yeah. So in this particular case, Christians, and we all live in a consumeristic society. We said that before. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. That's just how our society operates. But the danger here is that we've been trained to create our identity with the products and brands. So religious products and brands have been created to fill that need. So a person's identity as a Christian now has less to do with internal transformation and more to do with displayed products.
Yeah, and it's really easy to do because Courtney and I, recently just got back from a trip, and we were down in Montana, and there were in some of the stores that had home decor, and there was definitely a section that was in the one store that was definitely geared towards the Christian and
Christian furniture.
Well, displays, not like it was a couch. Displays, like where there's pictures and signs and different things you can place, somewhere in there that, that would speak to, again, whether it was a cross or scripture, all that sort of stuff. And there was a fair amount there that you could decorate your house like a lot.
Or apparently there's bumper stickers and
tons of bumper stickers.
There's Christian apparel now. So in the case they're describing here, then a Christian isn't identified by their behavior or their values. They're identified by
the decor that they have,
their products. Yeah, they're brands.
Yeah,
just like we've been trained to do in society. And I think this has caused a drift from a faith of substance to one of perception.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we can look at even how we select churches. Like I think there would have been, several generations ago where it might have been much more the idea of doctrinal beliefs, a particular denomination. And that would have been, even if you moved, you would have found something within that, church, that, especially the denomination and all that sort of stuff. Now, those aren't necessarily the same factors. It's, it can be things definitely in the more recent past, music style, even though I don't think it's a big thing, but music style was a big thing. I think now you're getting the idea of the celebrity pastor.
Sure. And
it's the idea of like, you can be connected to that.
Yeah. I want to be associated with that particular guy.
That particular. Church, And I think that can be a really big thing. I actually heard a story, this is just a few years ago, where there is a more well-known pastor, and he videoed into a number of satellite campuses, and apparently this is what I heard. I didn't witness this myself, but on weeks where he wasn't being videoed in, and that local campus pastor spoke, there was a significantly less people that Sunday, and that was quite normal. And so there was that connection where it's sort of like I go to that person and that's the person I see, and then it becomes that again. It becomes a brand. Like it became so connected that even when that person just wasn't, it was never there, but like even the video wasn't there. It was.
I actually was at a conference one. I know the person you're talking about, and there was one of the campus pastors from that church was speaking at the conference. He was a well-known guy, and he said he gets up to speak at that church as the campus pastor one Sunday when people were traveling from out of state who wouldn't know that the other guy wasn't speaking that week, drove thousands of miles to hear him, and then he had to get up and preach. It was he said you could feel the disappointment in the crowd. Poor guy. Yeah. So church in a consumeristic culture has more to do with packaging than product.
Yeah.
And Skye in the book says that branding in the church flies in the face of what we read in the New Testament. John the Apostle, a close friend of Jesus, in the first chapter of his account of Jesus, the Gospel of John, John 1:14 says, "So the Word became human and made his home among us. He was full of unfailing love and faithfulness, and we have seen his glory, the glory of the Father's one and only Son." Now, the interesting thing here is the word translated as word here is from the Greek word logos, from which is derived the word we use for logo, how a brand is identified. And he goes on to say in the book that if outward identity was enough, then the word or logos would not have needed to become human like Jesus. We would have only needed to put that brand or logo on merchandise, music, books, t-shirts, and jewelry. But obviously that wasn't good enough, because Jesus did become human so that we could know what God is really like, and so we could learn to follow Jesus and become like him, loving God and loving our neighbors.
Right. So I think the question is then, what do we do? Like, where do we go from here?
Where do we go from here? Yeah.
How do we, using the title of this series,
how do we color outside the lines?
How do we color outside the lines?
Well, I think the first thing is what we've been talking about is we have to understand that we have been shaped by our culture, and that parts of our identity have been constructed through brands. We have to step back and sort of understand and realize that our imaginations have literally been wired to think of identity as something that is external to us rather than internal. So we have to, first of all, change our thinking to realize that your character is really what's inside you, your character.
So then we can, when we read things like Colossians 3:12, where God has chosen you and made you his holy people. He loves you. So your new life should be like this: show mercy to others, be kind, humble, gentle, patient.
Yeah, and I think Paul is saying there that we should be focused on the inward things and not the external things, because this follows apart on the external factor in those days that identified Jewish people, which was circumcision. Mm-hmm. Paul is saying that is no longer of any use to anybody, because God has made us his holy people. So we need to focus on the internal part. And Jesus himself said in John 13:35, your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples.
Right. So as we see this through Jesus, but we see a very much a primary characteristic of God is love.
Yep.
And so followers of Jesus that's kind of what we're supposed to do too. Like if we're going to, like our brand, if you will, it's not about what we wear on our t-shirt. It's not about all that sort of stuff. And we're not saying any of that is just bad in and of itself, but it needs to be something that's lived out and not just, like a catchy slogan we say. And I think sometimes that we can do that. We can be better at platitudes and say like, oh, look at us based on the platitudes or what we communicate on social media and all that, as opposed to really how we are walking out in our lives.
I have a plaque for that. I love in the book where Dave tells about a friend of his he met at college.
Skye?
Oh, Skye, sorry.
Talked
Skye
about Dave.
Talked about Dave, yes. I'm a little dyslexic today. And this person, Dave, didn't focus on the outwards appearances of being a Christian, but simply showed God's love in tangible ways. He cleaned up after frat parties. He collected garbage and recycled the beer bottles, and he organized raking the local residents' lawns near the university to build up goodwill for the university in the neighborhood. He washed people's windshields, and he fed campus parking meters. And when he was asked why he did these things, he responded with, "It's just a way of reminding you that God loves you." And here's the kicker. When non-Christians discovered Dave's motivation, they were confused and even uncomfortable. They assumed all Christians were prejudiced and confrontational. And how do you disagree with someone who isn't trying to argue with you? And how do you refuse an act of kindness from someone who expects nothing in return? But I guess for Christians, this almost sad part for us is the official Christian groups on campus were also perplexed with Dave, because he was revealing his identity through loving acts of kindness and not by associating with the typical campus brands of Christianity. So Dave was focused on actions rather than image.
Yeah, and I wonder if there's even, where we can get caught up in this, is that we want something quickly identifiable.
Yep.
So like, how do I quickly categorize you?
Yeah.
And how do I quickly understand that? And obviously having an external brand can quickly do that. Like you look, as we're going back to the brands message, you can tell, someone's iPhone user, Android. You just look at the phone they're using, and it's quickly understandable and stuff like that. Whereas this is something that, it's not necessarily, quick to the eye of the why, just that they're doing it. And it's been something, again, we're talking about that transformed on the inner side. When something transformed inside, it's not necessarily just easily discernible, but it's something over time you are impacted with, and other people around are impacted with. And it can be far more just, I think, I was going to use impactful for you, so we use that word so many times. Yeah. But it can just be something that's just far deeper in just how we are interacting and feeling from people, because it's something coming from something deep down, and the time there, and not just sort of like, again, easily identifiable. Maybe they'll use the word surfacely identifiable, just instantly, like, oh, they must be this.
I think the danger with that is what we've been saying, is that we assume Christians are a certain way based on the way they're portrayed in the media, and we haven't always acted very well. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying we don't always deserve it, but you're right. If there is internal transformation and a primary driving motivation of love, that's going to be shown in actions, which may not immediately be discernible as, oh, he did that because he's a Christian.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think Jesus also told a story once about, I think a story most people are familiar with, the Good Samaritan, which echoes this same sentiment. A man was on a trip, and he was robbed and beaten and left by the roadside to die. And two men associated with the temple, the Jewish temple, pass by and do not help the man. And this is something I hadn't really considered before, is that it's not just that it was inconvenient for them, but according to the Torah, if they were to touch a person in such a state, they would become ritually impure, which means they would have to go and have a bath and take a break for a day. So that can become very inconvenient depending on where they were going and what responsibilities they had. So they pass over the guy, and obviously they were recognizable in that day by what they wore.
Yeah.
They were associated with the temple by this external indication of their clothes. But Jesus makes the hero of the story a despised Samaritan, who were people who had a sort of a Jewish background but couldn't prove it. So they were the ones that were left behind after the exile, and they intermarried with people locally, and they had no record of being a pure Jewish line. So they were always disrespected by official Jews. So Jesus makes this guy the hero because he helped the man, even though he was a Samaritan and the man who was beaten was a Jew. So his actions, the Samaritan's actions, were the answer to someone who asked Jesus what command in the Torah is the most important, which is to love God and love your neighbor, and the sort of the question, the kind of question a lawyer would ask. So who exactly is my neighbor? And I thought this was a rather poignant example of the same thing, is that Jesus picks something that shows the internal compassion of a man that the Jews despised, even though the people who should be willing to help, based on the fact that they were associated with the temple and there were definitely laws about helping people, overlooked the man and went their own way.
Well, in the book, Skye features a painting and writing of Van Gogh, and he concludes with a quote from Van Gogh. He says, "It is good to love many things, for then lies true strength. Whoever loves much performs and accomplishes much, and what is done in love is well done."
Yeah, and I think that answers the question. So where do we go from here? One, we have to realize that there is a problem, and two, we have to really look at the example that Jesus gave and his primary characteristics and try and emulate that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us, and we just hope that when we talk about this brands and how we can maybe be caught up in the external images, and instead of that internal transformation that leads to that ultimate, being branded by God inside, and that allows us to love one another and to let that to be our marker. If that is something that, cause you to think more or want to know more about what that means, and even that whole process, we'd love to have that conversation with you. And we also just want to encourage you that we're on that same journey, trying to really understand and be more and more what we believe is being like Jesus and following after his example. And so if there's something you want to know more about and want to connect with us about, we'd love to talk with you about and join in on that journey as you join in on ours. Thank you so much. Please like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you next time.